David, l'Université Autonoma di Barcelona. And now we speak in English, if you don't mind. So it's a very huge subject, so forgive me if I forgot a few things, and of course I won't have time to discuss all the films, but I will give you a sample. So basically I would like to start with a few remarks on Lovecraft's own relationship with cinema, with motion pictures, and maybe, as you probably know, he showed some content for nascent medium, like other writers of his time, like Virginia Woolf, for instance. It's quite well known. Even 3 days before his death, he speaks, I quote, of the utter and unrelieved hokum of the moving picture. He disliked Todd Browning's Dracula, Karl Freund's The Mummy, on account of their lack of fidelity to the source work. I quote again, generally speaking, the cinema always cheapens and degrades any literary material it gets hold of, sorry. Especially anything in the least subtle or unusual. He states in a letter to Robert Barlow, I saw the cinema of Frankenstein and was tremendously disappointed because no attempt was made to follow the story. Yet he adds, however, there have been many worse films, and many parts of this one are really quite dramatic when they are viewed independently and without comparison to the episode of the original novel. Unquote. He would have been quite horrified at viewing some adaptation of his own stories. Yet, Lovecraft seems to have enjoyed a few films that appealed to his imagination and dealt with mythological subjects in particular. He regretted not having seen The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. He was thrilled by The Nibelungen by Fritz Lang, expressed his fascination towards films with spectacular sets of special effects like The Lost World, Harry Hoyt, 1925, and was quite struck by the performance of Lon Chaney in The Phantom of the Opera, Rupert Julian. I quote, what a spectacle it was. Horror lifted its grisly visage, and I could not have been made drowsy by all the opiates under heaven. If Lovecraft is not enthusiastic about cinema, the filmic medium is faced with some problems when putting his work on screen. Most adaptations have modified considerably the source material to fit the expectations of the audience at various moments of history. We should distinguish between straight adaptations, there are very few rewritings associating several sources and also mingling several genres, and reappropriation of Lovecraftian themes and motifs. So I will discuss a few cases, general cases, then I will focus on two adaptations of the same story, the story of the case of Charles Dexter Ward, and we'll end with an evocation of two appropriations, the Quatermass trilogy, you probably know, and John Carpenter's Apocalyptic trilogy. I wanted to talk about the found footage film as well, but I don't think I have time. So first, why is it difficult to adapt Lovecraft? His fiction offers a rich imaginary world which could provide a good material for filmic transposition. I'm not speaking too quickly, okay? Right. Mysterious objects, forbidden secrets, adventurous explorations of the Australian desert or Africa, discovery of horrors at the heart of modern cities, investigative and initiatory quests, metamorphosis, blasphemous, shocking revelations, blurring the frontiers between dream and reality, paroxystic states of consciousness, alien beings, of course, monsters that are also gods, cosmic entities and fossils, etc. However, there are relatively few successful adaptations, as I said, few straight adaptations, and many flawed films. Lovecraft had a peculiar conception of what should be a true weird tale. In a letter to Catherine Moore, he defines his approach. The hero of such a story is never a person, but always a phenomenon or condition. The punch or climax is not what happens to anybody, but the realization that some conditions contrary to actual law, as we understand it, fictionally, as a brief moment of existence. For the object of weird fiction is purely and simply emotional release for the very small group of people whose active and restless imagination. revolt against the relentless tyranny of time, space, and natural law. If you've read his letters, you can find this over again and again. It must, if it is to be authentic art, form primarily the crystallization or symbolization of a definite human mood, not the delineation of events. The events should figure secondarily, atmosphere being first. This is quite a well-known sentence. Thus, both characters and events are secondary in regard to atmosphere, which raises, of course, a problem for filmmakers. Another aspect is Lovecraft's philosophical stance, pessimism and nihilism. Beyond the veil of reality, there is something threatening coming from outer space or another space-time continuum, or already there, déjà là in French, buried in the depths of the ocean, or the desert sands, or the frozen immensity of the South Pole, which makes our world nightmarish. In that cosmic perspective, man is thus an insignificant creature who fails to understand the mysteries of the universe and becomes insane when he tries. This cosmological pessimism goes together with a kind of epistemological pessimism. As Lovecraft states in The Call of Cthulhu, the most merciful thing in the world is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. But someday the piecing together a disassociated knowledge will open up such terrifying vistas of reality that we shall either go mad from the revelation or flee from the deadly light into peace and safety of the new dark age. Flee from the deadly light of knowledge. Thus, man is rarely a hero in Lovecraft fiction and barely a character to identify with, merely a prop. Michel Houellebecq speaks of the, quote, futility of all psychological differentiation. All they needed, these characters, was functional sensory equipment. Their sole function would be to perceive. It might even be said that the deliberate banality of his characters contributes to reinforcing the compelling nature of Lovecraft's universe, unquote. This approach of character raises some problems for a Hollywood producer, obviously, as does the almost complete absence of women characters and erotic elements, only abject matings between female humans and entities, usually albino or degenerate women, and consequently the lack of love interest. Thus, the conventional elements of the horror film plot, sex, explicit violence, and suspense, well, there is suspense, of course, are absent from Lovecraft's fiction. And we do have an addition of female characters, as you will see in most adaptations. The abstract, almost philosophical character of some text, the lengthy descriptive passages, the convoluted syntax, does not favor adaptation. Lovecraft's ideological stance also is xenophobia, racist statements may raise some problems for producers, obviously, and are usually erased out of the adaptation. Is that theological pantheon, non-Euclidean geometry, cyclopean architecture, and cosmic threat require sophisticated special effects, normally. While Lovecraft avoids by using suggestion or a rhetoric of the implicit and the unnameable and explicit representation of the monster or alien entity, cinema must at some point show the monster, even if this visual revelation is delayed. Because of the complex hybrid nature of these entities, the film must have a relatively big budget, or should have, to avoid ridicule or grotesqueness. John Carpenter, for instance, I will come back to, states, once you start reading Lovecraft, you realize it is in his language. It describes things that are indescribable, the indescribable horror. Some of his best stories are just impossible to visualize. Even with digital technology, it is still an aesthetic challenge to represent Lovecraftian entities, distinguished by several features which point to the impossibility of representation. Viscosity, a lot of viscosity or viscousness, inconsistency, hybridity, multiplicity, and we'll see that in Carpenter's film. No discernible shape is accessible to the observer, who loses his rational landmarks. When he attempts to depict in details the cosmic entities, the narrator often uses the medium of artistic representation, that is a fresco, a bas-relief, so in other words, an ekphrasis. When he does try to describe by means of an eyewitness, it is often when the thing is reduced to a corpse, like Wilbur Whateley in the celebrated Dunwich Horror. And I quote, "It would be trite and not wholly accurate to say that no human pen could describe it, but one may properly say that it could not be vividly visualized by anyone whose ideas on aspect and contour are too closely bounded with the common life forms of this planet and of the three known dimensions." So basically, it is too alien to visualize, to describe. So, of course, the results are uneven. So I will speak of a few straight or less straight adaptations. We will see that, in fact, there's only one case which I consider as a straight adaptation. Linda Hutchins defines adaptation as a product, but also as a process of intertextual transformation. She even refers to a palimpsestic element. She rejects the notion of fidelity, obviously, to the source text, that's why I started with that, and privileges the autonomy of the text. We are here in an autonomous university. Perhaps one way to think about unsuccessful adaptations is not in terms of fidelity to a prior text, but in terms of a lack of the creativity and skill to make the text one's own and thus autonomous, unquote. The first attempts at adapting Lovecraft take place fairly late, that is in the 60s. Roger Corman offers in 1965 a first filmic version of the case of Charles X. Ward, but we're going to come back to that, masquerading under a Poe title, The Haunted Palace. Other films follow, like The Shattered Room, David Green, 1966, or The Dunwich Horror, Daniel Haller, which uses rather unconvincing psychedelic special effects and subjective camera to convey a sense of the cosmic exteriority of the monster. A certain fashion for Lovecraft is expressed in the 80s in the parodic, gory films of Stuart Gordon, we'll come back to, and those tamer and less inventive of Brian Usna. More recently, there have been quite a wave of Lovecraftian adaptations, partly in the wake of the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival, you probably heard about, created in 1996 and held in Portland and Salem. So I shall first talk about Stuart Gordon because he's one of the most consistent adapters of Lovecraft stories from early on, that is the 80s until almost now. In 1985, he directed the famous Reanimator, a slapstick horror gory adaptation of Herbert West the Animator, meant by the writer already as a kind of ironic and humorous retelling of the Frankenstein myth, published in a magazine that was also partly specialized in parodic pastiche texts. In the story, a maniacal and obsessive doctor manages to raise the dead and is eventually torn apart by zombie-like creatures, like Dr. Moreau in H.G. Wells' celebrated I May Go to Tomorrow. Gordon offers a retelling with campy undertones, with implicit reference or even explicit reference to the Rocky Horror Picture Show, for instance, or Flesh for Frankenstein. As Rick Warden states in his story, horror film, in his history of the horror film, Reanimator encapsulates more than a century of horror tradition. Its production design juxtaposes bold, saturated colors with the genre's typical shadowy eye contrast lighting, most notably in syringes of Mad Dr. West bright yellow-green reagent glowing against black backgrounds, a look that evokes both post-war science fiction and full-color comics. Of course, there would be another subject matter, but of course, Lovecraft has been a great source of influence for comics from long ago and until now. Alan Moore, for instance, recently. West owns all the attributes of the Lovecraft character: a juvenile, frail physique and an excessive hubris which urges him to transgress human limitations. Here, the frontier between life and death. Events that are spread over several years in the source text are condensed within a month. A chain of events leads to West's dismemberment by his living dead victims, while he himself only kills once. Gordon instills elements of comedy in this orgy of blood, slapstick, neutralizing, for instance, the reanimated cat in the cave, the very un-Lovecraftian triangle, love triangle, Hill, Daniel, and the girl. Dr. Hill lust for Daniel's bride, which leads to the kidnapping, and the Grand Guignol scene, which gave its reputation to the film. When Dr. Hill holds his own severed head, trying to caress Meg. All this is achieved not by betraying the source text, strangely enough, but bending it to highlight graphic violence and grotesqueness. So I skipped that, but I'll just quote Philippe Rouillet, who speaks of the inversion of the taboo of necrophilia as the dead rapes the living. Then West is assaulted by the living corpses controlled by Hill, and as he attempts to kill Hill's body by injecting him a massive dose of serum, he's caught up in the intestines of Hill, which carry him in a dazzling white light to an undetermined beyond. In 2001, Gordon directed Dagon, which is, I think, an interesting film, even if it goes far away from Lovecraft to some extent. Mostly an adaptation of The Shadow over Innsmouth, rather than the title story. So that's an interesting feature. Very often, the titles do not correspond to the contents, or only partly to the contents. The action is set also in a contemporary context in a Spanish harbor. So there's a double shift, the geographic, cultural, and time and temporal. It is set in the Spanish harbor, they're up in Boca, of course, which refers to the mouth as well. The first images of the inhabitants are furtive and disquieting, a strange face behind a closing shutter, bent, shuffling silhouettes, weird, low voices. The inhabitants' physical blemishes are developing. They are born human, then mutate, which enables Gordon to exhibit differentiated hybrid monsters and thus to increase the spectator's discomfort by foregrounding images of abjection and impurity. For instance, you know the famous concept of Mary Douglas of impurity, the idea of, which is taken up by Julia Kristeva in Powers of Horror. The village seems fixed in a past time without modern appliances, contrasting with the attributes of modern life, like Barbara's the heroine, because there is a heroine in this film, which of course was not the case in the original story, which is ineffective, which is ineffective. Symbolically, the hero's computer is thrown overboard from the beginning of the story. Contrasting colors express that dereliction, drab, black, grayish, greenish for the inhabitants, and vivid, as you will see in a moment, for the protagonist, who are thus easily spotted and pursued, as in this extract. You can see also the webbed hand here. It's in Spanish. So you can see that he's spotted because of a green, and according to he's human and normal, as opposed to all the others. And the camera, interestingly, draws her in through a tracking backwards shot, or on the contrary, accompanies her, so there are both subjective shots and objective shots. Notice that each time we have the editing wavers between this stacking backward or stacking forward. The camera is quite big. Notice also the emphasis on the soundtrack. And the soundtrack is quite important, of course, in Lovecraft stories, and I think Gordon captures quite well this soundtrack element, various odd, uncanny noises. Notice that here the camera stays remotely from the character, as if it were abandoning her, and of course the sound stops here. We feel that there is a relief, and of course it is the reverse, as you will see.
Necesito un teléfono, por favor. Es una emergencia. El padre dijo que podía utilizar su teléfono para llamar a la policía. ¿Sí?
It looks a bit strange, as you can see, even though not particularly monstrous.
¿Podría utilizar su teléfono, por
It is
favor?
this impassive face, the color of his skin as well, of course. Here notice the fear that he seems to feel at the same time, so it's a bit violent here. And the priest, quite unexpectedly, the priest turns against her, so she expects some kind of comfort, and of course it is not the case. So the village seems to be fixed in a past time without modern appliances, as I said, by means of a more and more graphic exhibition of the supernatural elements. Gordon shifts the mood of his film from the uncanny that you just saw in a way. The inhabitants do not wink. The face of the fisherman seems oddly motionless behind these black glasses. The priest's hands are strangely webbed, as you saw in a close-up of the hand, even though she doesn't seem to be affected by that. And the slits on the neck of the hotel keeper are in fact gills. The story turns to the horrific with the discovery of monstrous specimen of tanned human skins to serve as masks for the hybrid denizens. The flashback narrative of the drunken old man, Zadok Allen in the story, who confirms the existence of the fishman. The film drifts into weird fantasy, and adds an erotic touch, which of course is totally absent again from the story. When we finally meet Axia, I'm not going to show her, sorry, a beautiful and cruel princess, part octopus, part woman, reminding of the female heroines, victims of femme fatale, on the covers of Weird Tales or Amazing Stories. So there is a link, but by means of the magazines, the famous magazine Weird Tales in particular, which were quite different from the original stories as well. Gordon adds scenes of sadistic violence and torture, including the ritual sacrifice of the girl that you just saw, the naked Barbara, who is thrown into a pit and promised to the fish god. Physical dereliction is emphasized as well as the decay of place. Gordon manages to convey the mood of the source narrative, in particular these images of the sinister harbor, as you saw, the dirty, squalid streets, the hybrid entities hiding behind closed shutters, the smelly bathrooms. You can imagine that they smell, even if you don't feel it. It discovers its true origin, that's quite close to the original story as well, adumbrated in a premonitory dream sequence, and quite a number of films in fact contain dream sequences, as we saw, as we'll see. The fragile objective link that separates rationality from the irrational is definitely broken, and the nature of the following events is clearly on the side of the supernatural and phantasmagoria. That's another aspect also, that there's rarely a rational explanation at the end. There's always the supernatural prevails in the end. This is the case also for the a later adaptation of the Dreams and the Witch House, in which you could feel that the character is mad, has gone mad, but in fact no. What he states is quite true. The Imbocanos, the inhabitants, are hybrid telepathic beings who worship an even more alien creature, an extreme form of godliness. This is also interesting because it is typical of Lovecraft stories. There's always a kind of secondary degree monster, for instance, the Mountains of Madness. A less, maybe a more well-known story is the Necronomicon, a three-part story produced by Brian Usna, which again freely adapts the Lovecraftian universe with 3 short pieces linked by frame narrative with Lovecraft himself. Jeffrey Combs, in search of inspiration, introduces himself in the vaults of a library guarded by strange monks, you can imagine, in order to read the Necronomicon. So obviously the Necronomicon is a case in point because most of the adaptations or the reappropriations of Lovecraft use the Necronomicon, show the Necronomicon, quote the Necronomicon. But interestingly, these three narratives are in fact remote from the original text, as if it was impossible to stick to the origin, to the source text. Christoph Gans, who has become famous since, fairly famous, used his story is called The Drowned, and it loosely adapts, in fact, the rats in the walls, so it has nothing to do with the sea normally. He stages an experiment aiming at reviving the dead fiancé of the hero, thanks to the magic formulas of the Necronomicon. The film relies on a flashback structure which sets a parallel between the Delaporte and his ancestor. The latter tried to resurrect his wife and daughter drowned in a shipwreck, so again, nothing in relation to the text. Simply the idea of inheritance of an old mansion. He is confronted with submarine entities and commits suicide, which is of course a very Lovecraftian motif. The descendant reiterates the experiment, but the beloved one returns in the shape of a hybrid entity with a human face and a tentacle body, betraying her origin as a prelude to the surging off of the great Cthulhu. The special effects are rather coarse and do not match Gans' ambition, who proves inventive, however, in frame composition and editing, playing also with a very mobile camera set on a crane and allowing spectacular angles. The Code is adapted from Cool Air, and it stages a newspaperman who requires upon a series of murders in the district of Boston and discovers the secret of Dr. Madden, a mad scientist, extracting from his victims a fluid enabling him to prolong his life in a refrigerated space. The only interest of this short film is the presence of David Warner, the great actor, in the role of the mad scientist. Whispers by Yuzna starts as a detective story. That's another feature of most of the film, the hybrid genericity of these adaptations, as if there was a necessity to combine different genres to attract the spectator. The film is full of poor, horrific special effects and illustrates the Lovecraftian idea simply of the survival of alien entities in the death of modern metropolis, like a horror thread hook, for instance. So the triptych suffers from the lack of financial means, very clearly, limited shooting time, B-film conditions. The best film maybe of the lot is Gans, because it has a competent editing and filming, and these references to the Hammer films, in other words, the intertextuality, those are Roger Corman and devices used in Japanese ghost films, so there's a mixture of genres here and cultures. But the filmmaker confesses that his major influence is, in fact, Poesque, the fascination of female beauty linked with death, the concept of return from the dead, rather than Lovecraftian. So again, there is a kind of displacement, which we will find again with Corman. So the only example I found, and maybe there are others, of straight adaptations, so to speak, is The Call of Cthulhu, Lehman, in 2005. And this independently produced film is one of the most convincing recent adaptations, contradicting the idea, by the way, that one needs a high budget to adapt Lovecraft, because obviously this is a small budget. This 46-minute movie is black and white and silent, a pastiche of expressionist movies of the 20s, with numerous intertitles or title cards, which enable to follow a rather complex plot, as you know, and the film picks up the main events of the source text, adopting its embedded narrative structure and adding a prologue and epilogue. The film opens on the revolving shot of a jigsaw puzzle that represents Van Gogh's The Starry Night, very unusual, of course. The anonymous narrator, pent up in a psychiatric asylum, typical Lovecraft opening as well, asked his lawyer to destroy documents inherited from his great-uncle. Confronted with the hesitation of his interlocutor, he tells him the story of the investigation led by his great-uncle about a mysterious cult. So you know the story. He has gathered a file made of several documents, testimonies, either written or drawn, or objects like the sculpture of a tentacle entity, as clues, as you will see in a moment. Lehman follows Lovecraft's plot fairly closely, using flashbacks for each secondary narrative, and also double exposure, superimposition, to show letters, press cuttings, diagrams, personal diaries, sea maps, sailor's log, etc. The film stages the testimony of Henry Wilcox, a young sculptor haunted by dreams of an ancient city, then that of Inspector Legrasse, who was the witness of a strange ceremony in Louisiana. Then the testimony of Johansen, the sailor, who was the only eyewitness of the catastrophe before his death, consigned, and who before his death consigned the events in his diary given to his wife. So the professor reads this diary, which is converted into images, the discovery on an uncharted South Sea island of the sunken city, Cyclopean city of Gilles, and the emerging of Cthulhu, a cosmic entity which kills the sailors or drives them into madness. If the incarnation of Cthulhu, a plastic puppet animated in stop motion, is rather unconvincing, the film offers a close rendering of the story's narrative, setup, mood, and substance. The image plays upon light contrast and uses projected shadows. You will see that in a moment. Shots are well composed, privileging close shots, even close-ups on the face of the witnesses, what we call reaction shots, and to show how they react to the event, to the off-screen, let's say. And slanted images as well, slanted images, low angle, high angle, and slanted images as well. Lehman emphasizes the expressiveness of the faces, by using heavy makeup, like in expressionist movies, and low-key lighting. And the sets are the result of what Jeanette would call a bricolage, that is, made mostly of cut-out papers and plastic. Digital technology serving to integrate all kinds of images. Well, I'm just showing you an extract of that. The non-Euclidean character of the architecture of the city is rendered by means of forced perspective, trompe-l'œil effects, and extreme camera angles again. And mirror tricks are also used quite effectively. So I just show you an example of this. The music is almost omnipresent, and it is an empathic music, as Michel Chion would say. But notice the close-ups. Here it is the captain of the boat that discovers another boat, derelict boat. Here is the sculpture of Cthulhu. You can notice the play on shadows, very strong with low-key lighting. The intertitle, of course. Notice the use of the lamp, which involves the picture of Dorian Gray, Albert Lewin. And here is a zoom out on the... So this is the main protagonist, who remains anonymous. And you will see how he would say, like Lovecraft would say, pieces together dissociated knowledge by confronting the experience of the sculpture, Henry Wilcox, and the events that took place on the boat. So this means that the phenomenon is not local, but universal. Notice also the use of double exposure, details as well, and in fact there are a lot of metonymic shots. Here is, you can see a close-up showing his anguish and the high-angle shot. curiosity for the phenomenon that is a mixture of fascination and fear, but the character goes on. It's only at the end that he wants his friend to burn all the documents, in fact. So this is an interesting straight adaptation, I think. Now I would like to compare two different adaptations of the same story. I'll give you another example. One is very famous. It is The Haunted Palace, which adapts the title of a famous poem by Poe. In fact, it is, of course, an adaptation, as I said, of Charles Dexter Ward. Even if the credit sequence only mentions from a story by H.P. Lovecraft without quoting the title and aims at exploiting Poe's reputation, the film script follows rather closely Lovecraft's plot. Rather closely, I would say. But there are many changes. It relies on a dual time frame. The occult activities of the witch in the 18th century is arrest, public trial, and execution. So we start with this, in fact. Whereas the other film, on the contrary, introduces that flashback sequence in the middle of the film. So there's a shift in terms of there's a displacement. Corman limits the historical episode to the opening sequence that stages the beginning of a ritual aiming at conjuring up the ancient gods. This ritual, consisting of delivering to a monstrous entity a young woman in a state of hypnosis, is interrupted by furious villagers, and the sorcerer is burnt alive as a witch, of course, and he curses the whole community, which explains also the various monsters that we encounter throughout the city. Vincent Price, of course, is a major actor, and he perfectly embodies this double character, so to speak. The modern plot is situated 110 years later, probably towards 1850. The descendant comes back to the village with his wife, Anne, which is not the case, of course, in the original story. So there's always a wife, a fiancée, a mistress, or a victim, woman victim, to take possession of the castle that he has inherited. There's a striking likeness between Kerwin and Ward, still submitted to the curse, and the villagers still submitted to the curse are convinced of Kerwin's return, which the narrative will confirm by means of the portrait motif. And I will cut this short, but I will simply show you the scene.
Dexter Ward.
So here, clearly, there are several sequences of confrontation between Ward and the portrait, and this one shows that he is, in a way, overwhelmed by the spirit of the witch.
Leave me alone. I will never leave you.
You can notice the editing, cross-cut between the close-ups of the portraits, almost extreme close-ups, and the zooming in of the camera showing that the portrait exercises power upon Charles Dexter Ward.
Too strong for you. Too strong. Fire you!
Okay, so you can see that the last shot, when his wife appears, he is already Kerwin, right, to some extent. He has been invested by Kerwin's spirit. I don't know. I've got some time yet. Okay. So, Kerwin's portrait is a fantastic object, so to speak, used by the spirit of the dead sorcerer in order to invest the psyche of his descendant. When Ward and his wife, an added character, enter the Gothic mansion, what they see first together with the spectator is the portrait at the back of the frame, but radiating light. Anne Ward notices the uncanny resemblance with her husband, exclaiming, "Charles, it's you." It's absolutely fantastic. The portrait is set upon the chimney, which confers the object a spatial superiority. Several confrontations then punctuate the film, partaking of the bewitching power of the portrait. Psychic appropriation is conveyed by the shot reverse shot editing, opposing shots of Ward's face in high angle and close-ups on the painted face of Kerwin with intense burning eyes, as you saw, filmed in low angle. The psychic power is stressed by Ward's fascinated face, constant and erratic changes in his behavior and decisions, his voice becoming more imperious, authoritative, less modulated by the softer inflections in tone that are typical of Price's acting, as you know. The shift of behavior creates an uncanny feeling which triggers a fantastic effect, reinforced by the introduction of a voiceover which seems to emanate from the portrait, as we saw. The low, raucous voice is associated with close shots and zooms on the portrait during the confrontation. A dialogue is established between the portrait and Ward, the uncanny effect being emphasized by the transfer of words which takes place at the moment when the witch enters Ward's body. We start from the backward tracking shot on the portrait, enabling Ward to enter the frame. Another tracking shot closes on Ward's face, whose expression has changed. The transfer is expressed by means of a shift in colors as well. Kerwin's face becomes greenish, which links him to a corpse according to the symbolism established by, as you know very well, by Michel Pastoureau, the French critic, theoretician. But also, of course, relates him with the evil and diabolical, even if it's not the devil that is invoked, but then the older gods who want to come back to Earth thanks to couplings with human beings. Kerwin also resurrects, by means of ritual incantations, his mistress Esther Tillinghast, or this is, of course, where the story drifts away from the text, and he uses his wife as a bait to contact entities. The film closing in on the invasion of the castle by villagers equipped with torches and the liberation by Dr. Willington Ward and his wife. The evil portrait is burnt, which suggests that he is vanquished. But the last shot of the film frames Ward with greenish face and imperious voice, show that the spirit of the witch is still active in Ward's body. Pullman integrates references to other Lovecraft texts, in particular the Darwin horror, staging mutant, monstrous villagers. So again, as I said, implication of integration of several texts is quite typical also of the adaptation processes. While Poe privileges psychic interiority, Lovecraft's open at a cosmic threat at the end, which erases the importance of human presence, but the text does that. Corman's film, in fact, differs from Lovecraft's stance. The disproportion, what is quite typical in this film is the Poesque archetypes, in fact, rather than Lovecraft. Emphasizing female characters absent in Lovecraft, so Esther, the dead mistress, and Anne Ward, who, under threat of the witch, who seeks to replace her husband, and also, by the way, in her bed. So, of course, this is not Lovecraftian. As she faints, for instance, the film starts, the credit sequence of the film starts with a spider's web. At one point in the story, this is enacted when Anne Ward encounters a gigantic spider's web, which is a metaphor, of course, for Kerwin. As she faints, the ominous silhouette of the servant, again in greenish, having a greenish skin, looms in the darkness. Corman then displaces Lovecraft's return motif, what Hélène Cixous called la poétique de revenir, foregrounding not intellectual curiosity of the ancestor, but rather a romantic longing for recapturing love beyond death. So clearly there's an inflection, a poesque inflection in a story that is Lovecraftian. So, in fact, if Corman succeeds quite well, because as you know, he knows quite well Poe's work, and he devoted a cycle of 8 films to Poe's adaptation, rather remote blues adaptation, but still, he fails when he tries to convey an idea of Lovecraftian cosmic otherness. Even though he shows the monstrous entity Yog Sothoth briefly and almost out of focus, better so, he can't visually express the sense of dread typical of the Lovecraftian tale. It is mostly through sound effects that the director manages to convey a feeling of terror. So I won't insist on that, but it is clear that the sound is more efficient than the image, again, in this sequence. Despite his shortcomings, Corman manages to illustrate a major Lovecraftian motif, that of the possession of the human psyche by a superior force, a recurrent theme in all his stories, from the beginning of his career almost to the end, the shadow of time. Coming from an entity coming from a remote past or from cosmic outsideness. However, the excess of Cohen's character, I would say, magic, forceful character, is better staged in the Resurrected, which is in a way more Lovecraftian than the Corman film. But again, you will see this time that the technique or the strategy used by Dan O'Bannon, the author of this film, who is famous for scripting partly Alien, Ridley Scott's Alien. This technique is rather than to, at the same time, of course, adapt directly the story, even if it changes the title, which he called Resurrected, and not the case of Charles Dexter Ward. But he also mingles several genres, namely detective fiction, film noir, and horror story, right? At the same time, it is also historical. There's also historical elements, since there is an attempt to recapture the feelings, the mood of the 18th century. As well as Lovecraft's narrator reveals the heart of the story from the very first chapter, Dan O'Bannon sets up a dialogue where, again, the wife declares, after a first confrontation with Charles Ward, "That is not my husband." So there's a complete reversal. The previous character said, "Is unlikely, uncannily like my husband," and this time she said, "It is not my husband." The film tends to highlight the crude, direct revelation of the awful truth concerning the case of the demented scientist, so as to give more credibility to the incantations and magical formulas used in the story. The young Ward, has been transformed into keen on archaeology and occult sciences, has been transformed into a more mature scientist, expert in pharmacology, so more scientific in a way, right? The private detective who plays, in fact, the main part in film noir fashion and with voiceover, leads the investigation in a purely irrational, pragmatic way, even though his name, John March, is obviously a Lovecraftian wink, as it reminds the name of the narrator in The Shadow over Innsmouth. Scientific realism then tends to downplay the alchemical and occult quality of Ward's experiments, and it also contrasts with the dark romantic mood which prevails in Corman's version. However, O'Bannon does not fully dispense with the sorcery displayed in the novel, and the remains of the alchemist and Kabbalist, like Nicolas Flamel, for instance, are preserved in urns that are visible in Kerwen's underground laboratory. There are in fact two laboratories, an open one, so to speak, and hidden one, which is typical, for instance, of Frankenstein adaptations as well, as you know. Even more striking, he stages the spectacular effects of the essential salts and the alchemical liquid poured over the bone of the deceased, enabling the witch to recreate life. Theatrical scenes of black magic display the monstrous entities that are the products of these experiments and are an echo to the excessive nature of the story and the hyperbolic style of the writer, which Denis Méliès, a famous critic, defines, I quote, as an obscene organic horror and scientific hyper-visibility. And the notion of hyper-visibility, of course, is interesting. So I will show you, hopefully, the two very short extracts. First, the dream sequence, which is quite interesting because it combines Lovecraftian elements, horror elements, and I would say love elements or sex elements. With a kind of something connected, close to The Shining, to one famous sequence in The Shining, where the beloved woman turns into a monster. So, of course, it is very quickly edited, as you can see here, as happens often in dreams. and the soundtrack helps. Again, we have a portrait, which plays an important part, and we have another painting which plays an important part, a Goya painting, quite famous Goya painting, Saturn devouring children. Here, very quick shot on that. Of course, the gory element, the medical element, experiment, with a close-up on the eye, which is very reminiscent of Dario Argento. And you see here the beloved woman turning into a kind of monstrous entity. So this is, of course, a fantasy, a sexual fantasy of the character who wakes up. The second extract is simply an example of the special effects that are fairly rudimentary, that are used for the time, that are used in the story. When the team of investigators manages to enter the labyrinth where they find the secret laboratory of Kerwin and his diary. His notebook that is strongly emphasized. So this is very Carpenterian. We'll see that in the thing if we have time. Looks like the thing, in fact, to some extent. That is a kind of autonomous body part, assuming the horrifying type of life.
It's real.
Showing that it is real, it is real. This is, by the way, also a catchword in Marvel Madness, when the character says, "I am real."
Oh shit.
So you can see that this team of detectives is completely invented by the filmmaker, by the scriptwriter. And so we have a sense of suspense that we don't have in the story as such, right? We have another kind of interest, of course, for what happens to Ward, but not this type of action scene with the discovery of the monster like that. So clearly, the director has tried to adapt to the necessities of the producer, possibly, and of the public, by adding another genre, other characters, and other action scenes. Okay, so much for that. Okay, maybe I will skip to the fine. Okay, maybe I will finish by evoking some appropriations of Lovecraft, not adaptations, but reappropriations of his motifs. And we could have taken many examples. Alien, obviously, with a script by O'Bannon, as I said, and designs by H.R. Giger, the Swiss artist, who is very famous for a series called the Necronomicon, which may be called a biomechanical series, that is, which is also highly erotic and sexual, quite different from Lovecraft, but so there's a kind of combination of, I would say, sexy Lovecraft or sexed Lovecraft. We could also mention, of course, Guillermo del Toro, Hellboy, the first Hellboy, in which a Lovecraftian monstrous cosmic entity, Ogdu Jahad, tries to escape from the crystal prison where he has been lying for thousands of years. So obviously this is a Lovecraftian motif as well. Italian horror cinema is also strongly being influenced by Lovecraft. I'm speaking of Lucio Fulci in particular. I will skip that. And I will focus briefly on two examples, the Quatermass trilogy and Carpenter trilogy. In the Quatermass trilogy, produced by the Hammer Studios, there have been also many TV serials, as you know. So it's a very complex history. The head of the British experimental rocket group has to fight an alien threat from outer space. And as the films develop, danger looms closer. First, the invading entity is brought back from space. In the second, it is already there, lying in wait in a gigantic factory stolen away from the government. In the third, it has, I quote, lain dormant in his human psyche for 5 million years before being accidentally woken up. In other words, the threat evolves from an exterior force to one hidden not only among us but within us, which is also, of course, quite Lovecraftian, as you know. For instance, the character in The Shadow over Innsmouth discovers that he is an Innsmouth hybrid character. In other words, the threat evolved from, Quatermass instrumental is bringing the menace to the human planet. He unwittingly devised the means for alien creatures to survive on Earth. And in the last film, the Quatermass, Quatermass and the Pit. The Pit is a typical Lovecraftian term, by the way, the Pit, the shovels and the pit, etc. He is himself part of the danger. In other words, Quatermass is contaminated, infected, so to speak, by the Martian. So we don't know what he will become. In the same way, this happens in The Thing, Carpenter. At the end, people don't know if they are contaminated or not. So, to cut it short, I will show you briefly two examples, two extracts from this film. Sorry, first Quatermass, from the third film. Sorry, the discovery of the insect-like Martian, found in a kind of spatial vehicle. And of course this is interesting because it evokes Lovecraftian creatures and also the idea that the insects will in a way replace humankind in the remote future. Notice also the use of the green color and the ichor which replaces the blood. And typically in Lovecraftian monsters, the blood is green, right? And quite disgusting, or abject, as Christopher would say. We also have the conflict between rational beings, scientists, also army officers, by the way. This is a typical British touch, the presence of the army officer, who contradicts, of course, the scientist. So, this is so much for this one. And the other one is quite spectacular. The other one is quite spectacular. It is very... So this is in a way it evokes the end of the Call of Cthulhu, when the Cthulhu is in a way when the ship goes through the character, goes through the monster, which then recomposes itself. So you've seen, have you seen that? Okay. So they destroy this creature, but we don't know what will happen next. So the idea that there's something more than we know, that there are entities that are more powerful than us, and that in a way can contaminate us. There are also echoes of 2001: A Space Odyssey, where the monolith helps humankind to become intelligent, so to speak. Here it is the Martians that help human to avoid, to go beyond barbarism. I will finish briefly by an evocation of Carpenter's trilogy, and maybe showing first one extract, and then I will try to comment a bit. Because in fact, most of Carpenter's films are under the influence, so to speak, of Lovecraft, and himself recognizes, acknowledges debt to Lovecraft. For instance, The Fog conjures up Lovecraftian themes and motifs, surging up of a legendary, traumatic past, the omnipresent mist, which recalls Lovecraft's story, The Strange High House in the Mist, and from which emanate malevolent, vengeful entities, the ghosts of the sailors, as you remember. The Thing is a remake of Hawks and Libby's film. He stages an Arctic space, icy and snowy, taking up the frame of the Out of the Mountains of Madness. So we need more time to demonstrate that, but briefly, it is this narrative of a scientific expedition who discover a city buried under the ice, strangely shaped fossils, then corpses of extraterrestrial entities. The scientists are finally confronted with protoplasmic monsters, the Shoggoths. In Carpenter's film, a group of scientists discovers the remains of a spaceship which shelters a mysterious shape-shifting entity capable of incorporating various animals and human organisms and taking up their physical appearance. Hence the paranoia that prevails in the group as anyone becomes suspicious of the other's true identity. And this entity records on the one hand the Shoggoth, a physically unstable creature, on the other hand the thing of cosmic origin which causes the degeneracy of vegetables, animals and human beings in the colorated space, for instance. The film rearranges the elements of the story and takes up, as I said, the idea of a non-human civilization which becomes extinct in the Antarctic because of protoplasmic species. Here, the arrival of the Thing is shown in the first images with the crash of the flying saucer, and Carpenter's protoplasm is rather frightening, each part of the being potentially autonomous, the organism incorporating its victims to imitate them in a form of devouring process. And this idea of imitation is quite frequent also in Lovecraft, for instance, The Whisperer in Darkness, where the entity imitate or put on masks to imitate the human being. So this idea of mimetic imitation, mimetism is quite important. In the same way also, the narration is subjective in both cases. There are a lot of subjective shots on the part of Macready, for instance, the pilot, or Blair, the doctor. There are two main characters who we discover the story with, etc. So this is an important example, and I will finish maybe with the most representative, even though the second one is quite important as well. Prince of Darkness is also very, very indebted to Lovecraft, but I don't think I have time for that. So just a last extract from In the Mouth of Madness, who, as you could recognize, is a direct tribute to Lovecraft. In the Mouth of Madness, Shadow over Innsmouth, Mountains of Madness. So it combines titles of two stories, and within the story there are other Lovecraftian titles, supposedly written by the writer character of the story, Sutter Kane, who also, as you know well, evokes Stephen King. So there's a combination of a bestseller horror writer and a Lovecraftian, so to speak, writer who uses writing so as to bring back the monsters upon Earth. So this is the one of the Lovecraftian passages, and I will end on that. Just to show this, of course, this film is highly meta-textual and meta-filmic, probably one of the most meta-filmic texts of Carpenter. And you know that Lovecraft as well is quite meta-textual in some of his stories when he stages, for instance, the influence of writing on the feelings of the narrator. In The Unnameable, for instance, the story that you probably know. So here, we literally, the veil of reality is torn, and the character that we thought was real appears as fictitious as the stories that he writes. So everything, in fact, is fictitious, and the boundaries are blurred between fiction and reality all the time in this film. And now you will have a kind of almost straight quotation from Lovecraft, of course, a combination of several sentences, of Lovecraftian sentences. This is the hero, again, a kind of film noir type hero, insurance investigator, as in the famous The Wildest film, Double Indemnity, inquiring on the disappearance of a writer. So they find themselves in a kind of uterine corridor, labyrinth. So entering a portal, so to speak, the image of the door of a portal is quite important as well. And in voiceover, the Linda Stiles character quotes from the novel, The Mass of Madness.
He did not shriek, but the hideous, unholy
We recognize Lovecraft's hyperbolic style.
As in the same second he saw them tumble upward out of an enormous carrion black pit, choked with the gleaming white bones of countless unhallowed centuries. He began to out away from the rim as the army of unspeakable figures, twilight by the glow from a bottomless pit, came pouring toward our home.
And now you will see very fleetingly the Lovecraftian creatures.
Again, I've read to the end.
So they have gone through the portal. So here they enter the screen. And you have also very fragmented back images of the monsters, intercast with the close-ups of the character running from them. Organic masses, hybrids, and the closing up of the monsters on him until he wakes up. So I think this, I won't have time to demonstrate that, but clearly this film is one of the most Lovecraftian appropriations that you can find, so far at least. I saw recently a Spanish film, I don't remember the title, but it's in French it's Territoire de l'ombre, Territories of Darkness, a 3-hour-long film. And there are a lot of Lovecraftian echoes in that, but I don't think it is as convincing. I suppose you know that film, yeah. Okay, so I will end there because I've gone beyond my time, sorry.
Thank you.